Chapter 16, Feudal and Late Medieval Europe. Section 2, the Church and the Crusades. We're going to first talk about the power of the Roman Catholic Church. The Church had great wealth, as we have talked about, as well as the Pope. The Pope had tons of wealth. And the Pope oftentimes had more authority or power over the kings and emperors of kingdoms. The Holy Roman Empire was created in 962, and it covered most of Central Europe and Northern Italy. So here's the Holy Roman Empire right here. Northern Italy, Holy Roman Empire right here. It's kind of a conglomeration of all the Germanic tribes. The king of the Holy Roman Empire was a guy named Henry IV, and Henry IV started to appoint church officials. However, the Pope, who was named Pope Gregory VII, was not happy with the fact that Henry IV was doing this. Gregory declared that only the clergy could appoint people to church offices. And this happened in 1075. So Gregory is actually challenging the authority of the emperor, or the king, King Henry IV. Henry was not happy about this, and Henry and the bishops who supported King Henry declared that the Pope's election was invalid. Pope Gregory responded to Henry's defiance by excommunicating him. That means you get kicked out or banished from the church. And Gregory also told his subjects, if you will, from his kingdom, not to obey him. Henry did kind of a clever thing and asked the Pope to forgive him. Now, as a priest, Gregory had to forgive Henry. So Henry regained his title and control over his subjects, but that conflict continued on for some time. The church played a dominant role in education by establishing schools at cathedrals. These are large churches. Scholars studied classical philosophers, but church officials worried it conflicted with church teachings. In the mid-1200s, an Italian scholar named Thomas Aquinas argued that both philosophy as well as Christian faith can work together in harmony. He said that both faith and reason came from God. Religious orders were the church's most important educational institutions. A religious order were groups of people who lived by rules specific to their order. Monastic orders, meaning those of the monks, they separate themselves from the rest of society to focus on prayer and service to God. Men who joined these monastic orders were called monks, and they lived in monasteries. Women who did this, who joined monastic orders, were called nuns and were living in convents. The Crusades were military expeditions from Europe to Palestine. Palestine was also known as the Holy Land, and these expeditions were there to free the Holy Land from the Muslims who had taken over control of a place like Jerusalem. Now, Palestine, the Holy Land, was considered sacred to three of the world's biggest religious groups: Christians, Jews, and Muslims. The Seljuk Turks took control of Jerusalem in 1071 and made Christian pilgrimages to the Holy Land nearly impossible. European Christians began the Crusades for several reasons. Obviously, the Turks took over Palestine, and that was the Holy Land, and they wanted to regain the Holy Land. But also, European princes and merchants each saw, benefits. The princes used the success in warfare as a way to gain power. Merchants were willing to finance the Crusades because they might gain riches through trade routes. So eventually, the Seljuk Turks here are going to attack the Byzantine Empire. And so the emperor of the Byzantine Empire asked for help from the Pope. So the Pope at the time, Urban II, will send a Christian army in 1096 to start the First Crusade. So I'm going to blow this map up, and you can kind of look at the path that these Crusaders took. So here's Constantinople, and the European, people came to Constantinople, then they headed through Asia Minor. There's some stuff here. And these areas down here is kind of where they had battles with the different Muslim groups. So they made it all the way down to Jerusalem and places like that, and eventually will win. Christian forces captured key cities in the Holy Land, including Jerusalem, in 1099, and divided the conquered lands into 4, what they called Crusader states. So you can kind of see in this map here the Crusader states: the red, the orange, the purple, green, red down here, purple. These were the Crusader states of Palestine. The Second Crusade will begin in 1147 after the Muslims recaptured one of the Crusader states. So I think it was this one. And again, Christian armies came down to liberate it from the Muslim control, but they were unsuccessful in regaining it. So they lost the Second Crusade. Muslim leader Saladin united the Muslims together and attacked the Crusader states once again in 1187. And this time he was able to recapture Jerusalem. The Third Crusade began in 1189 with some of Europe's most powerful leaders like Richard the Lionhearted, who was the king of England, involved in many of the battles. Still, the Christians were unable to recapture Jerusalem. But a treaty was established between Saladin and the Crusaders that would allow Christians to come to Jerusalem to visit it. The Fourth Crusade was launched in 1202, but this time the Crusaders only made it to Constantinople, and they attacked Constantinople and another Byzantine city because they needed to pay off Italian merchants who paid their way to get to at least Constantinople. And so they attacked actually the capital. Now, some consequences of the Crusades. Crusaders brought back with them Asian goods, which, people tasted it like, ooh, I like this. And so they wanted to get more, so they would head down and trade with people down in the Holy Land. And so trade will increase, which also helped towns start to grow again and merchants start to grow. So you see the end. The Crusades actually kind of brought an end to the whole idea of feudalism, because now people are starting to venture out and see new things and taste new things and trade for things. In Spain, Christians drove Muslims out of their kingdom in an event called the Reconquista. In the 1400s, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella united Spain and punished people who were opposed to church teachings. These people who were considered enemies of the church were brought before a court called the Inquisition, and the Inquisition then tortured and executed many of the people who didn't believe in church teachings, like the Jews and Muslims. That is the end of section 2.